In the sweltering summer of July in 1944, deep within the heart of central Germany, a figure named Hans Werner Lerche approached Hangar Number 7 with a mix of eager curiosity and cautious skepticism. The air was thick with tension and the weight of recent battles. But today, his interest was drawn to something unprecedented. An aircraft parked under the fragile light seeping through shattered skylights. A machine that seemed to belong to a world far beyond the confines of occupied Europe. Before him sat a United States-made fighter aircraft, a vivid example of American engineering, an F4U Corsair, with its unmistakable inverted gull wings and elongated nose that gave it an aggressive, predatory appearance. It looked as if it was poised to strike, lurking quietly in the shadows of the hangar. This particular Corsair had arrived at the Luftwaffe's facilities approximately 3 weeks earlier, having been transported by sea from Norway after it made an emergency landing in enemy territory. Its tail bore the registration sign JT-404, a relic of the Royal Navy, hinting at its storied past and complex journey. This aircraft was not just another war machine. It was a symbol of a different doctrine, a different continent, and a different kind of aerial combat. Lerche had reviewed many captured enemy aircraft, dozens of Spitfires, P-47 Thunderbolts, and even a B-7 bomber. Yet this Corsair was unlike anything he had examined before. The reputation of this aircraft extended across the Pacific theater, where it was renowned for both its remarkable performance and the fearsome nickname it had earned among Japanese pilots, Whistling Death, a moniker derived from the distinctive, almost haunting sound of its engine during high-speed dives. The German command was eager to investigate this aircraft further. They needed answers. Could this American fighter rival the formidable German fighters like the Focke-Wulf FW-190 or the Messerschmitt Bf-109? What were its vulnerabilities? And most crucially, what elements contributed to its deadly reputation? The questions hung heavily in the air, fueling secret inspections and hurried assessments during a tense period in the air war over Europe. By the 18th of July in 1944, conditions had shifted to yet another theater. This time, the skies over occupied Norway, near a port city called Bodø. Lieutenant Modeli, flying the same Corsair, JT-404, was on a reconnaissance patrol when his mission suddenly took a drastic turn. The engine began to falter, losing power intermittently. A sudden, critical fuel system malfunction left him with only 2 options: either attempt to reach the nearby British carrier, HMS Formidable, which was lurking somewhere in the Norwegian Sea, or seek an emergency landing in the unfamiliar terrain below. Modeli quickly evaluated the risks. Diving into the cold, tumultuous waters was too dangerous given the rough seas, and trying to make the carrier in such a compromised aircraft was equally perilous. In a decision born of quick thinking and steady nerves, he opted to land on solid ground. He spotted an open field not far from the coastline, near the town of Bodø, and carefully brought his plane down in a controlled yet hard landing maneuver. Miraculously, the Corsair remained largely intact after touchdown. The pilot immediately acted to destroy his radio and attempted to set the aircraft ablaze inside the cockpit, intending to prevent any sensitive technology or data from falling into enemy hands. Unfortunately, before he could complete this destruction, German troops arrived on the scene, providing an unexpected stroke of luck for them. To the Germans, capturing the aircraft in such a condition was fortunate indeed. Despite the harsh landing, the Corsair was practically undamaged, suffering only minor issues with its landing gear and fuel system that required urgent repairs. Most notably, it was an F4U-1A, the latest version at that time, featuring a raised cockpit canopy, which significantly enhanced pilot visibility, an essential advantage in fast-paced dogfights. Recognizing its value, the Wehrmacht command immediately relayed orders to Berlin. The aircraft had to be transported to Germany as swiftly as possible. However, transporting the fighter was no straightforward task. The damage to the fuel system meant the aircraft could not operate under its own power, and the Germans lacked the necessary spare parts to repair it quickly. Disassembling the plane on site and moving it by land or air would have taken weeks, time they did not have. The solution was daring and unconventional. Load the aircraft onto a ship departing from Narvik, and then transfer it across the sea to a German port, finally moving it by rail to Reichenhall. This intricate operation spanned 18 long days, but ultimately succeeded. The Corsair arrived at Reichenhall on the 5th of August, its surface creased with salt spray and minor corrosion damage, yet still remarkably intact and capable of flight once the fuel system was repaired. Once in Germany, the High Command took an intense interest in evaluating this captured aircraft. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring, the commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe himself, issued a personal order for a thorough examination. By this stage, the Luftwaffe was rapidly losing its dominance over the skies of Europe. Allied fighters like the P-51 Mustang and the P-47 Thunderbolt were decimating German formations with ruthless efficiency. It was clear that understanding the capabilities of the American aircraft is crucial for adapting German tactics and technology. The analyzed aircraft was the F4U-1A, the most refined and advanced version, distinguished by its raised cockpit canopy for better visibility. A young test pilot named Lerche, just 27 years old, was entrusted with this vital task. His experience was already extensive, having flown over 60 different types of aircraft, including 250 captured Allied fighters. Lerche was among the most seasoned pilots at Reichenhall. His mission was to push this unfamiliar fighter to its limits, to understand every nuance of its performance, strengths, and weaknesses in order to prepare German pilots for encounters in future battles. This aircraft, so rich with foreign design and engineering secrets, represented both a challenge and an opportunity for the Germans, eager to decode its fighting potential and integrate what they could into their own arsenal. His reports had always been precise, meticulously detailed, and brutally honest, delivering a clear and unvarnished account of the technical realities he observed. Yet, the Corsair presented a challenge unlike any other he had faced before. Unlike the P-47 Thunderbolt or the Spitfire, which experienced pilots from various nations had seen in combat and could describe with familiarity and confidence, the Corsair remained an enigma. No Luftwaffe pilot had ever encountered this aircraft in battle over European skies, which meant that all available intelligence about it was derived from Japanese reports operating in the Pacific theater. These reports painted a picture of an aircraft that was nearly unbeatable when commanded by a skilled pilot. They described the Corsair as a formidable machine, almost invincible in hand of someone familiar enough with its capabilities. Lerche dedicated 2 full days to studying the aircraft while it sat quietly on the ground, meticulously analyzing every aspect of its engineering and design. The engineering was undeniably impressive, marked by innovations that set it apart from earlier fighters. The aircraft's distinctive inverted gull-wing shape allowed for a shorter and more robust landing gear, an engineering feat that also provided enhanced strength during takeoffs and landings, while still offering sufficient clearance for the large propeller. The cockpit, specifically in the F4U-1A model, was elevated slightly to improve forward visibility, a significant upgrade over earlier versions. The armament was no less remarkable. The wing-mounted machine guns, firing through the propeller arc with 650 caliber rounds, could carry up to 400 rounds per gun, delivering devastating firepower capable of shredding enemy aircraft in seconds. Despite the impressive specifications on paper, Lerche understood all too well that numbers alone could not fully reveal what the aircraft was capable of in real combat. The true test lay in the experience of flying it himself. The scheduled date for the Corsair's initial evaluation was August 8, year 1944. Menacingly clear skies, gentle winds, and ideal flying conditions characterized the day, promising a smooth and revealing trial. Lerche arrived precisely at 6 o'clock in the morning at Hangar No. 7, where the ground crew had already completed all pre-flight preparations. Fuel tanks were topped to capacity, and all systems checked out perfectly. Nothing remained but for him to climb into the cockpit and see what the aircraft could do firsthand. The moment Lerche settled into the cockpit, he immediately noticed differences from the German fighters he had flown previously. The seat was positioned higher, offering an exceptional vantage point over the aircraft's long nose, which greatly improved forward visibility. The control stick was centered comfortably between his legs, unlike the offset throttle and stick arrangement in the Bf-109. The instrument panel was thoughtfully organized, providing clear, easily readable gauges that responded quickly to his glance. He initiated the engine start sequence, and the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double WASP powerhouse roared into life with a ferocious sound that resonated through the cockpit. The engine's output was approximately 2,000 horsepower, twice the power of a German Daimler-Benz engine fitted into a typical Messerschmitt. The entire aircraft shuddered with raw, unrelenting power as the vibration transmitted through the fuselage. Once the engine was running smoothly, Lerche taxied the Corsair toward the active runway. In the process, he realized just how long the aircraft's iconic nose was. On the ground, it completely obstructed his view of what was ahead. To compensate, he had to weave side to side, a technique he'd learned from interrogations of captured American pilots. Every pilot's experience in wartime teaching them how to adapt to equipment not designed with ground handling in mind. As he reached the threshold of the runway, he pushed the throttle forward decisively. The acceleration was abrupt and potent. Almost immediately, the Corsair surged forward, lifting its tail off the ground and pitching upward with astonishing agility. At approximately 80 knots, Lerche gently pulled back on the stick. The aircraft responded eagerly, climbing like a creature possessed, soaring upward in a way that no German fighter had ever matched. Arriving at an altitude of about 3,000 meters, or roughly 10,000 feet, Lerche began his systematic evaluation. His first focus was on basic handling. He banked the aircraft to the left, then to the right, assessing responsiveness and ease of maneuvering. The Corsair responded smoothly but undeniably felt heavier at low speeds, a trait that Japanese reports had also mentioned. The ailerons, or ailerons, demanded more force than what he was used to in the lighter German fighters, especially the FW-190. This meant that at low speeds, the Corsair was not especially agile for dogfights, confirming what Japanese pilots had warned about. The next phase involved testing acceleration. Pushing the throttle to full, he watched the airspeed indicator climb steadily from 300 knots to 350, then to 400 and beyond. Remarkably, the aircraft kept accelerating without showing any signs of strain or hesitation. An extraordinary feat when he reached about 420 knots, almost 485 miles per hour. Lerche gradually pulled back the throttle to decrease speed. Comparing that speed to the German FW-190A-88, which had a top speed just over 408 miles per hour, the Corsair's speed advantage was significant. But it was the third aspect of the test, the vertical maneuvers, that truly revealed the aircraft's character. He climbed to an altitude of about 6,000 meters, roughly 20,000 feet, and began a sequence of vertical climbs and loops. His first maneuver was a simple zoom climb, applying full throttle, pulling sharply upward, and observing how high the aircraft could ascend solely through inertia and momentum. This test, along with subsequent aerobatic moves, aimed to understand the aircraft's strength, control response, and overall stability in steep upward trajectories. The Corsair surged upward with explosive force, resembling a rocket streaking into the sky. Lerche kept a close eye on the altimeter, watching the numbers spin rapidly upward. First, it climbed past 6,500 meters, then 7,000, and shortly after, 7,500 meters. The aircraft was still gaining altitude when it finally reached a stall point at approximately 8,200 meters. That represented a gain of roughly 1,200 meters purely through the aircraft's own energy, a testament to its formidable power. Inspired by this, Lerche decided to test it again, but this time starting from a dive. He pushed the aircraft inverted, pulling it through into a steep descent, accelerating the speed until he reached nearly 450 knots, and then applied a vigorous pull into a vertical climb once more. The force of gravity pressed him painfully into the seat, as the G-forces intensified dramatically. Despite the immense strain, the airframe of the Corsair groaned under the stress but did not falter. The altimeter needle spun wildly, racing through the numbers: 8,000, 8,500, 9,000 meters. Lerche maintained the climb relentlessly, pushing the aircraft until it finally stalled at roughly 10,400 meters, which is over 34,000 feet above sea level. This moment marked a significant discovery. The Corsair was not engineered for the same kind of turning dogfights that fighters like the Spitfire or the Bf-109 excelled at. Instead, it was purpose-built for vertical combat, leveraging a boom and zoom strategy, dive down from above, attack with superior speed and power, then climb back to altitude to repeat the process. The massive Arminus 2800 engine provided energy advantages that no German fighter could replicate, granting the Corsair unmatched vertical performance. Lerche was eager to put this theory to the test. He set up a simulated attack run, beginning from 7,000 meters, diving swiftly down to 4,000 meters at maximum speed, then pulling out of the dive sharply, and finally executing an all-out effort to climb back to the original altitude. The descent was nothing short of terrifying. The Corsair accelerated past 500 knots, exceeding 575 miles per hour. The entire airframe shuddered under the intense stress, yet remained remarkably stable throughout. At 4,000 meters, Lerche yanked the stick back with force, expecting brutal G-forces. He estimated that he experienced around 6 Gs, maybe even a little more. His vision narrowed into a tunnel, but the aircraft responded flawlessly, pulling out of the dive without incident. Then came the climb. Full throttle engaged, maintaining the optimal climb speed. The aircraft shot upward with a relentless drive. Lerche checked his stopwatch. The climb took precisely 2 minutes and 40 seconds to regain 3,000 meters of altitude. Comparing this to a previous experience with the Focke-Wulf FW-1A, which he performed the same maneuver with 2 months earlier, he remembered that it took about 4 minutes and 15 seconds to climb the same distance. The Corsair's climb was nearly 40% faster, a significant and telling difference. Lerche's mind immediately raced through the tactical implications of this data. If American pilots employed these vertical maneuver tactics during combat over Europe, and it was almost certain they would, given how well-suited the Corsair was to this style, the German fighters would be at a severe strategic disadvantage. The Bf-109 and FW-190 were primarily designed for horizontal, turning dogfight combat. At low to medium speeds, they could outturn the Corsair. However, if the Corsair refrained from engaging in prolonged turning fights and instead focused on maintaining maximum speed while employing vertical strategies, it would keep German opponents chasing a target they could never truly catch. As part of his assessment, Lerche also examined the stability of the Corsair's gun platform during high-speed firing. He rolled the aircraft into a 30-degree dive, aligning himself with a ground reference point, and squeezed the trigger. The burst from the 650 calibers erupted with impressive power. To his surprise, the recoil was surprisingly mild. The sturdy, heavy airframe absorbed the shock with ease, allowing him to keep the gun steady on target. The sight remained stable, enabling him to maintain precise aiming during full bursts. Mentally, he compared this to the armament of the FW-190s, which mounted 2 13mm machine guns and 4 20mm cannons. Those guns packed devastating firepower but produced significant recoil, making accurate shooting at high speeds more difficult. In contrast, the Corsair's 650 caliber machine guns delivered less firepower per round, but the aircraft's excellent stability meant more rounds could be delivered accurately on target before needing to reload. After about 35 minutes of flying and conducting these tests, Lerche had formed a preliminary assessment of the aircraft's capabilities. Yet, before concluding, he knew there was still one crucial test he needed to perform, one that would solidify his understanding of the Corsair's true combat potential in various scenarios. This test aimed to uncover the most formidable and potentially devastating aspect of the Corsair's capabilities in combat. The pilot, Lerche, ascended once again to 7,000 meters and prepared for a simulated scenario that would put the aircraft's performance to the ultimate test. The scenario was straightforward. A Corsair would swoop down from above into a simulated attack run on a formation of German fighters. Once the attack was initiated, the German pilots would see the incoming threat and instinctively break formation, executing their standard defensive maneuver to evade the attack. The Corsair would overshoot the target, but instead of wasting time in a turn to follow, it would use its superior speed and aerodynamic design to extend its distance, then climb back up to its original altitude for another attack run. The key question was, how long would it take a Focke-Wulf FW-190 to regain the altitude of the Corsair and re-engage in combat? To simulate the attack run, Lerche performed an inverted roll into a steep dive, mimicking the descent and attack maneuver of the Corsair. He let the aircraft pick up speed, reaching around 480 knots, before pulling out sharply at 4,000 meters to avoid the ground. The force of gravity pressed him into his seat, his vision blurred at the edges from the intense G-forces. Despite the strain and the groan of the aircraft structure, the Corsair held firm. Immediately after pulling out of the dive, Lerche transitioned seamlessly into a maximum performance climb, employing full throttle and aiming for an optimal climb speed of approximately 130 knots indicated airspeed. The engine, a powerful R2800, roared relentlessly, pushing the aircraft upward as it clawed for altitude. He started his stopwatch to measure the climb time precisely. When the timer hit 5,000 meters, a minute and 15 seconds had elapsed. At 6,000 meters, the elapsed time was 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And when he reached 7,000 meters, 3 minutes and 35 seconds had gone by. Lerche leveled the aircraft at this altitude, checked his fuel supply, still adequate for further maneuvers, and calmly noted the elapsed time in his kneeboard. Then, fitting the calculations into his mental math, he recalled that he had previously flown a similar profile in an FW-1A just 2 months earlier. That climb from 4,000 to 7,000 meters had taken him a total of 5 minutes and 50 seconds. The comparison was staggering. The Corsair, with its advanced design and aerodynamic efficiency, could execute a boom and zoom attack, then extend away and return to combat altitude fully 2 minutes and 15 seconds faster than the FW-190. In aerial combat, that amount of time was essentially an eternity, an advantage that could decisively determine the outcome of engagements. But the implications of this performance disparity went even deeper. Lerche realized that the Corsair's ability to regain altitude so swiftly created a tactical dilemma for German fighters. Pursuing the Corsair meant chasing an aircraft that was faster, which would cause the pursuer to burn through precious energy and altitude, leaving it vulnerable once the Corsair gained distance again. If the enemy ceased the chase, the Corsair would simply reset at high altitude, ready to initiate another attack run unchallenged. Ignoring it was equally dangerous, as the Corsair could always climb back up with ease, preparing for another strike. Ultimately, it was a loss for the German pilot either way. Lerche was recalling a similar pattern of combat he had come across in reports from the Eastern Front. Soviet pilots piloting American P-39 Airacobras, often supplied through the Lend-Lease program during World War II, used comparable tactics against the German Bf-109 fighters. Although the P-39's performance advantage was only marginal, the Corsair's advantage was overwhelming by comparison. To explore the aircraft's defensive capabilities, Lerche conducted one final test, an emergency defensive scenario. He simulated a situation where a Corsair was suddenly caught from above and attacked by a FW-190. The Corsair pilot, upon noticing the attack, would need to react swiftly. What options were available? Lerche performed a sharp, aggressive defensive maneuver, rolling into a high G turn designed to force an overshoot of the attacker. The heavy control forces worked against him, and the turn rate was only mediocre compared to what the FW-190 could achieve. If this were a real engagement, the German pilot would likely have had him in his crosshairs within seconds. Recognizing this, Lerche then did what an experienced Corsair pilot would instinctively do. He leveled the wings, pushed the throttle all the way forward to maximum, and accelerated away, descending in a shallow dive to increase separation from the attacker. This exercise demonstrated the formidable offensive and defensive potential of the Corsair. Its ability to execute quick climbs, extend beyond the reach of pursuers, and counterattack from a position of altitude made it one of the most effective fighters of its time. The extensive testing clearly illuminated the aircraft's unique energy management advantages, giving its pilots a significant edge in combat against German fighters like the FW-190. The aircraft's airspeed indicator suddenly surged upward, indicating a rapid acceleration through the air. First, it crept past 300 knots. Then, it climbed further to perhaps 350, and soon after, 400 knots. As the speed approached 420 knots, Lerche executed a controlled, ascending turn. It wasn't a tight, aggressive maneuver. Rather, it was swift and efficient, aimed at conserving energy while maintaining momentum. His hand instinctively moved to his watch. He monitored the elapsed time from the initial acceleration to the point of deliberately breaking away from his imaginary opponent. In this scenario, the attacker would be piloting a FW-190, which, under combat conditions, would likely have only about 3 to 4 seconds within firing range before the Corsair was out of effective reach and ascending beyond firing capabilities. If the German pilot tried to follow into the climb, the Corsair, with its superior climb rate, would soon outpace him and reverse the engagement in its favor. Lerche was beginning to understand why the Japanese had dubbed this aircraft the Whistling Death. It wasn't solely because of the distinctive sound it made at high speeds. Rather, the name embodied its terrifying, unstoppable nature, the sense that defeat was almost inevitable once it was in proper position. A well-piloted Corsair was nearly invulnerable because it rarely needed to fight on the enemy's terms. However, no aircraft was flawless. Lerche dedicated the next 10 minutes to probing the aircraft's vulnerabilities. He tested how it handled at slow speeds, focusing on stall behavior. Falling below 150 knots, the Corsair noticeably lost responsiveness, becoming sluggish and heavy. The hefty ailerons demanded a significant amount of force to roll the wings, especially at reduced speeds. In a typical dogfighting scenario, where pilots crossed into slow-speed scissors maneuvers, a common tactic to joust for a firing position, the FW-190 or BF-109 would usually have the advantage due to their more precise maneuvering at low speeds. The challenge was getting the Corsair into that low-speed scenario without surrendering the initiative. A disciplined pilot would avoid it altogether, managing speed and positioning to prevent such close-quarters stalls. Next, Lerche examined the stall characteristics more closely. He pulled the nose up, gradually losing speed as he waited for the aircraft to stall. When the speed dipped to around 85 knots, the left wing abruptly dropped, and the aircraft entered a violent stall, a sharp, violent loss of control that occurred with little warning. The Corsair snapped into an inverted spin before Lerche could react. Although he recovered quickly, the experience made one thing painfully clear: slowing down during combat was risky and often dangerous. He then evaluated the visibility from the cockpit. The raised, nearly panoramic canopy of the F4U-1A, a significant step forward compared to earlier versions, provided much better outward view. Yet, the long, conspicuous nose still created a substantial blind spot directly ahead and below. In a turning dogfight, a German pilot could take advantage of this, slipping into the blind area and remaining there, ready to attack. The key to avoiding this vulnerability was to never allow the aircraft to commit fully to a turn. If the Corsair effectively avoided turning engagements, the blind spot became irrelevant. Lerche moved on to testing the aircraft's diving capabilities. He pushed the nose down and let gravity accelerate it to maximum speeds. As the speed increased, so did the control forces needed to manage the aircraft. He measured speeds climbing from 450 knots through 480 to 500 knots. At 520 knots, over 600 miles per hour, the controls became exceedingly heavy, and the aircraft's nose aimed to keep diving forward. Pulling out of such a high-speed descent took both hands firmly gripping the stick and considerable muscular effort. This revealed a real limitation. The pilot had to be cautious when executing a dive, planning the pull-out meticulously. An overly rapid dive could leave him unable to recover or could cause G-force-induced blackouts if the pullout was too forceful. Nevertheless, this weakness was not unique to the Corsair. The FW-190 exhibited similar constraints on diving. The Corsair's greater power reserve meant it could afford shallower dives and still maintain superior speed during pursuit or escape. After approximately 45 minutes of flight, Lerche had gathered enough data. He eased back on the throttle and prepared to descend toward Reckling Airfield. As he executed the landing pattern, weaving gently side to side to improve visibility past the long, obstructive nose, he methodically gathered his thoughts, mentally composing his report. The conclusions he reached were both clear and devastating, an honest assessment of the aircraft's capabilities and vulnerabilities. Finally, the Corsair touched down at exactly 0745 hours. The ground crew immediately came rushing to the aircraft, inspecting it for any damage resulting from the demanding test flight. Fortunately, they found none, confirming that the aircraft had endured the rigorous evaluation without issue. The aircraft appeared as formidable and robust as it seemed at first glance, embodying a sense of resilience and strength. Lerche, without hesitation, made his way directly to the technical office to draft his detailed report. He dedicated 3 uninterrupted hours to meticulously documenting every nuance of the aircraft's performance, capturing every observation, measurement, and tactical insight with precision. When he finished, the document stretched across 14 pages, each filled with detailed data and blunt conclusions. His primary assertion was unequivocal. The F4U Corsair marked a significant turning point in fighter aircraft design philosophy. Unlike traditional fighters optimized for sharp, nimble turning combat, this aircraft was built to leverage its superior power, incredible speed, and exceptional energy retention to control the flow of aerial engagements. It dictated terms by its mere presence, forcing opponents to adapt or falter. When considering German tactics, which relied heavily on agility and bleistift maneuvering, Lerche concluded that such approaches were no longer adequate when facing this new type of fighter. He proceeded to detail the aircraft's impressive performance attributes. The maximum attainable speed exceeded 420 knots at sea level, equating to over 485 miles per hour, significantly faster by about 15% than the FW-190A-88, one of the German fighters of the era. Its climb rate was also notably superior, roughly 40% better in combat climb profiles, allowing it to rapidly gain altitude and position itself advantageously. Furthermore, this aircraft demonstrated remarkable energy retention, capable of executing multiple boom and zoom attacks without losing significant altitude, thus maintaining an advantageous position throughout combat. Its armament comprised dual machine guns of 650 caliber, providing a stable firing platform and sufficient firepower for various combat scenarios. However, the report did not shy away from highlighting critical vulnerabilities. The aircraft's maneuverability at low speeds was poor, controls felt heavy and unresponsive, and its stall characteristics were vicious, posing a serious risk during tight turns or evasive maneuvers. The forward visibility was limited, restricting pilots' situational awareness during complex dogfights. Following this technical appraisal, Lerche meticulously analyzed tactical considerations, an aspect that would stirringly spark controversy. His advice centered on defensive tactics against the F4U Corsair. He strongly recommended avoiding direct engagement whenever possible, emphasizing that its superior energy and speed advantages made it nearly impossible to defeat in a straightforward fight. If an engagement was unavoidable, pilots were advised to limit the encounter to slow, energy-sapping turning combat, where the German fighters retained a tactical edge. He cautioned never to pursue a Corsair in either a climb or dive, as doing so would cost precious energy and leave the aircraft vulnerable. Instead, pilots should exploit the limited forward visibility of the Corsair during turning maneuvers, but only if the enemy pilot committed fully to the turn. Attacks should only occur when holding a significant altitude advantage, preferably over 1,500 meters, though even then, a skilled Corsair pilot could likely escape. Lerche's overarching conclusion was stark and unambiguous. The F4U Corsair exceeded all contemporary German fighters in the energy fighting regime. Should this aircraft be deployed in substantial numbers within the European theater, it would pose a formidable threat to Luftwaffe operations, challenging the existing aerial combat doctrine. Having signed and sent his report through official channels, Lerche was fully aware of the inevitable consequences. He knew the document would be scrutinized by the technical staff, then escalated to the general staff, and eventually reached the highest levels of military command, most notably, Hermann Göring himself. Anticipating the fallout, he understood that Göring's reaction would likely be furious and critical. Indeed, just 3 days later, Lerche was summoned to Berlin for a tense and charged meeting. The atmosphere was heavy with expectation. A high-ranking general staff officer, whose name Lerche never learned, questioned every aspect of his report with aggressive scrutiny. The officer challenged the accuracy of the performance data, asked whether Lerche was certain about the numbers, whether he had considered that the captured Corsair might have been modified or altered from its original configuration. He also inquired if Lerche had taken into account the intelligence reports from the Pacific Theater, which seemed to contradict some of Lerche's findings. But Lerche stood firm in his convictions. He reaffirmed that the data was precise and that the aircraft was as capable as his report indicated, possibly even more so, considering he had only about 45 minutes of flight time to explore the full envelope of the Corsair's performance. His response was cold and unwavering. The technical observations were accurate, and the conclusions, though controversial, were justified by the data. He insisted that the aircraft's capabilities had been thoroughly and objectively assessed. The response from the officer was chilling in its dismissiveness. He acknowledged Lerche's technical data but dismissed the tactical conclusions as premature, asserting that the Corsair was fundamentally a naval aircraft designed for carrier operations, not suitable for the kind of combat anticipated in the European theater. The aircraft in question was never intended to be produced or deployed in large numbers within the European theater of operations. Instead, any intelligence and reports related to it would be classified and kept strictly confined to those who deemed it absolutely necessary to know, ensuring that sensitive information remained hidden from broader knowledge. Lerche understood this reality all too well. The report he authored was effectively buried, not because it contained inaccuracies or falsehoods, but precisely because it revealed an uncomfortable honesty that the higher command or political authorities preferred to ignore. It was a stark reminder that sometimes truth served as a threat rather than an asset in the fog of wartime secrecy. After completing his work on that particular analysis, he returned to Rechlin and resumed his research and testing activities. Over the course of the following 6 months, he meticulously examined 14 additional captured Allied aircraft, each time compiling detailed reports. These documents consistently echoed the same unsettling truth. Germany was gradually losing the technological race. Despite all efforts, their advancements were falling behind. Yet, the report about the Corsair aircraft acquired a peculiar afterlife of its own. Word of its findings circulated informally among Luftwaffe fighter units through unofficial channels, not through the official command channels that held back this knowledge. Pilots, exchanging information and insights that their superiors refused to provide, shared their impressions and assessments of the American fighter. By the late months of 1944, even German pilots who had never encountered the Corsair firsthand had come to understand its strengths and vulnerabilities through these clandestine channels. Nevertheless, this knowledge mattered little in terms of official policy or deployment. The Corsair simply did not make its way in significant numbers to the European combat zone. Instead, it remained primarily a fixture of the Pacific theater, where it proved to be a formidable presence that decisively outperformed Japanese fighters, exactly as Lerche had predicted. This situation was not lost on Lerche, and he found a certain irony in it. He had uncovered the fact that one of the most lethal fighters of the war, an aircraft that dominated its opponents in the Pacific, was underestimated and misunderstood by the German military leadership. Despite knowing the truth, little could be done to alter the course of events. The information that might have changed strategic decisions was intentionally suppressed, and the aircraft's true capabilities went largely unexploited in Europe. Hans Werner Lerche survived the chaos of the war and its aftermath. In April of 1945, as Soviet forces advanced toward Rechlin, he opted for a strategic retreat, fleeing westward to avoid capture. Ultimately, he surrendered to American forces. Recognizing his specialized expertise, the United States Army Air Forces quickly recruited him, but in a role that was a stark reversal of his wartime activities. No longer tasked with evaluating enemy aircraft, he now tested captured German planes, an essential step in understanding and countering their technology from the perspective of his former enemies. After the war, Lerche dedicated himself to documenting his extensive experiences. His memoir, titled Luftwaffe Test Pilot and published in 1956, included thorough accounts of testing both German and Allied aircraft, including the famed Corsair. That book has since become a vital resource for aviation historians, shedding light on aircraft performance and comparative analysis during World War II. Throughout his life, Lerche remained captivated by the Corsair. Many years later, during interviews, he described it as the most impressive fighter he had ever flown, despite having piloted over 60 different aircraft types. He was particularly fond of its engineering philosophy, the design philosophy of creating an aircraft around a specific tactical doctrine and then executing that doctrine with relentless precision. The Corsair's performance in combat proved him right. In the Pacific, it achieved an astonishing kill ratio of 11-1 against Japanese fighters, a statistic that underscored its dominance. Marine and Navy pilots who had flown it consistently considered it the best fighter of the entire war, and the nickname, Whistling Death, had become synonymous with its fearsome reputation. The aircraft truly lived up to its formidable reputation. However, Lerche's report went beyond mere technical assessment. It revealed a deeper, more troubling issue related to military intelligence and institutional honesty. He had provided accurate, actionable intelligence about a significant potential threat, one that could have influenced strategic decisions. Yet, instead of confronting or leveraging this information, the Luftwaffe command chose to suppress it, preferring to avoid facing the uncomfortable reality of German technological inferiority. This pattern was not isolated, but repeated throughout the German military hierarchy in the final years of the war. Officers who reported honestly about the capabilities and weaknesses of Allied forces were often accused of defeatism, and crucial intelligence that clashed with the official narratives was systematically hidden or dismissed. Such practices resulted in strategic paralysis, decision-makers making choices based more on wishful thinking and denial than on factual assessments. Lerche's testing of the Corsair encapsulated this systemic failure. He spent only about 45 minutes in flight and compiled a comprehensive 14-page report, providing an honest and precise evaluation of the aircraft's performance. Despite the clarity and accuracy of his findings, they were largely ignored or suppressed by the higher command. The truth, in this case, was there for all to see but went unheeded, exemplifying how institutional interests often trumped factual intelligence in times of war. The lesson offers insights that go far beyond the events of the Second World War, emphasizing principles that are universally applicable across diverse organizations and institutions, whether they are military, corporate, or governmental in nature. At the heart of successful adaptation and survival lies the crucial ability to confront and genuinely listen to uncomfortable truths. This capacity to face difficult realities can mean the difference between thriving in changing circumstances or outright collapse under pressure. In this context, Lerche served as a presenter or messenger who delivered unembellished, candid truths about the situation at hand. His honesty stood in stark contrast to other choices made by the Luftwaffe, which opted to pursue a path that ultimately led to their downfall, namely, to ignore or dismiss what was necessary to adapt effectively. Instead, they chose to cling to their existing strategies, even when those strategies proved insufficient, leading them to collapse under the weight of their own refusal to face reality. The figure of Hans Werner Lerche deserves recognition for his contributions to aviation history and for exemplifying integrity in the face of adversity. He passed away in the year 1993, having reached the age of 75. Throughout his life, Lerche left behind a legacy built on meticulous and honest evaluation of aircraft performance and design. His work involved scrutinizing and providing truthful assessments of over 60 different types of aircraft, including some of the most advanced fighter planes that took to the skies during the tumultuous years of World War II. Among the many aircraft he evaluated, the Corsair stood out as a notable example. Lerche managed to fly this iconic fighter plane just once, and that flight lasted only for a brief 45 minutes during August of 1944. Despite the short duration, this flight was profoundly revealing. It provided him with enough understanding to grasp the core capabilities, limitations, and potential improvements of the aircraft, illustrating how even a limited exposure can be instrumental in drawing meaningful conclusions.